how we can create an isolated network between two virtual machines and having it facing the issues when we have two network adapters, okay, while assigning them the static IP address. Okay, so here with the solution that when we having any issues while creating the virtual machines by static files, so I will explain here like what we will do. So let's say I have this two networks I have. One is public, okay, and another is private network I have. So these two networks, what I will do, I will create a virtual machine between these two networks, and that will have that will pull the records from a file which is .csv file. Okay, so I will provide a list of IP address in a file, and that file would be CSV file. Okay, so we will communicate with our ESXi host, and then we will ensure that our file gets passed through these two isolated network. Okay, so they are two isolated network. Means it this suppose this public network is on 192.168. Let's say it is on 192.168 dot 0 dot 1. So this would be on second network, like 192, the same series. Okay. 168. So like this, they are two isolated network, and we have to create a virtual machine, or we can by means of this CSV file. Okay. So let's go back to our agenda, and we will do it by means of PowerCli, which would be very helpful. So for what I will do, first I will take the we will understand the code till this point. Okay, so this piece of code which we attach here for our virtual machine, we will understand here in a simplified form. So we have taken here a simple template. Okay, so by means of the template, we have given a sizing parameter, like means it can take 0 to 3 values to and we can have taken the get cluster command. So it will ask the cluster, communicate with the cluster. Okay, and after cluster, it will check the template. Means we are communicating it by template. Okay, so once the template will define the parameter. Okay, so that template we have taken, and this list would be taken in a form of all the VM list. Means like this would be our VM list for which we would be aligning the things with. So this is our VM, and VM list we will get from here, and here will be the virtual switch which would be from the ESXi host. Okay, so from the ESXi host we will be taking these things, and we will be working on it. So this ESXi would be responsible for communicating with the switch. Okay, this would be the switch parameter we will be doing, and the code group, the virtual code group we have to take, which is on a private network. Okay, so if we will go ahead in our lab environment, so that you can check, I can log into my lab. So I'll have to log in first. So it will ask here my credentials. Okay, so I will start my lab. In the meantime, we will discuss this code also. Okay, so my lab will get started. So before this, we have to connect to the vCenter server in order to check all the switches. Okay. So basically, we would be understanding it by means of our lab environment. Like this would be the lab, and I have opened the Chrome browser here. Okay. So this Chrome browser we have put, and I have logged into my vSphere client, and this is by Windows session authentication. We can log in. Okay, so now we can check again that this is our lab environment which we are logged in. Now it is talking about the our code talks about our virtual switch. So we are actually creating a virtual machine in our ESXi host. So that's the reason we have used this command here. Okay, you can see that this we have used here the ESXi host. So the name can be according to our lab and by the virtual switch. So if we check about the switch parameter, so in the configuration we can find it that is the switch. These are the virtual switches, okay, which is responsible for our ESXi host. So this will be our virtual switch for VM creation, okay, which is connected to this much uplink. And in that way, we have checked our virtual switch this with the VLAN 0. Okay, with the switch will be on the VLAN 0 ID. So they have a virtual machine. So see, you can here you can see the VLAN ID. Okay, so they have these machines have been assigned to the virtual machine. We view the settings, then we can come to know that on this port ID it is situated. Okay, then we can check for the cluster, get cluster. Now these are in cluster, so we have given the parameter and we have get the VM host command here. Okay. Now we can check on the further part. Let's say if I have to check the data store. So this is the data store I have put it here. So data store would be this one, this one. Okay, this is the region data store that we are communicating in our code. And after that, we have applied this on a for loop like 1 to less than 2. So it will check for the template which we have defined here. So this template will come here and will assign the VM name parameter with the first function as for loop. Okay. And after the VM list will create it in the first loop with the new VM, it will get created with this variable which we have defined here, and the new data store which is we have defined here that will come here with the my data store cluster. So now this cluster name we see. So this cluster name it comes from this data store. Okay, and the VM host if we will define the VM host which we have defined here that will come from here. Okay, and the template which we have defined dollar template. So dollar template which is this one which we have taken from here. So this parameter will come here. And in the pipe we can start those VMs. Okay, so this is our code for this part, like how we can create a virtual machine. And the next part of code we can also see here, like now we have to create a custom specification. Now suppose I have a file called deploy.csv here, and in that file I have this parameter of Windows Server 28 machine. I can give the parameter of OS type specification, like which type of parameter I have to give, the full name, the original name, the naming scheme, like it's VM. Okay, the work group, if it's in a work group, then you can give the work group VMware. Okay, now new OS customization specification. Now operating system customization, you can view here with regard to NIC teaming. Okay, so now these are the parameter which we will study here more depth. So I can take the screenshot of this parameter, the customization, okay, to have better understanding. Okay, so new OS customization at the rate customer NIC mappings. Now, when we check our lab environment on the networks part, we will go, let's say, okay, so this is our networks. Okay, and in networks, so there are distributed switches, distributed code group, and uplink network. Okay, so here we are customizing those parameters. Like we have the OS customization NIC mapping with the Windows Server 2008 parameter, which we have already taken. Okay, which from the previous lab, and remove OS customization NIC mapping. So it will remove those custom mappings, and we have defined one variable for clone. And again, we have applied the loop with less than vmlist.on. Suppose we have a list of three VMs. Okay, so it will communicate in a part of zero, then one, then two. Okay, and the static IP would be taken it from our file which is deploy.csv. Like we have defined the file there which is called deploy. dot csv. So this file would be responsible for taking track of VM list. Then you can assign the new network adapter with the each network name on a private network. Okay. So as we have discussed that we are creating the machines on a private network with the Ethernet thousands to start connected. Okay. So it will take the first adapter of VM list from the VM list of a zero. Okay. So this will be the first parameter of the VM for taking it, and it will take the private network card from the list private NIC card. Similarly, we will check the IP mode configuration. So in that way, we can assign the IP address and the default gateway via our DNS server. Okay, so the DNS server will be responsible for assigning the IP address on a private network using static IP. Okay, and with the IP address subnet mask, these are the predefined parameter we'll add. Now, this NIC mapping, this variable now we'll call again here. Okay, so to get those customized parameter and to create the clone of this virtual machine. Similarly, this OS customization will do by this command. Okay, where position equal to 2. So these two positions we have to understood that on our lab environment when we create. So NIC mapping would be managed by these ports. Okay, so let's say these are on a distributed switch and I am creating a network here. Let's say so new folder, new data center. Okay, so networks we this would be predefined, which is on the ESXi host. If we add, okay, so if we go on our ESXi host and we go on our networks, then we will find these are the regions on which network is defined. Okay, so here these are network protocols which we have discussed now only. So if we check on edit settings on this, so we'll get the configuration part of all the port binding, the advanced setting, the VLAN ID, which you have discussed now. Okay. So the NIC theming and the failover part, or we can also export this into a file when we go to on export settings. So it will export configuration of all the details. Let's say test I will give. So it is okay. The backup we can create here. So for the network, we have okay. I will have opened this file. Okay, these are in another .bat file which is created. Okay, but we are interested more on this is the XML file. So XML file can give the code group which we have the distributed switch name. Then we compared our code. Okay, so and the static IP address. So this is for our XML file for the backup purpose. Okay, coming back to our code. Now here we can find we can also once we have get the OS customization map unique mapping. So here also we can get that by PowerCli command line. If we communicate it by means of a layout, let's say we can go it and get OS customization. We can do the custom unique mapping. Okay. So it is communicating with what we have to connect to first to vCenter server. Okay, so we connect to vCenter server, connect to VI server. This is the IP address of our VNX ESXi server, sorry, our vCenter server. And then we will go with ahead administrator at the rate or dot local, then password VMware1 hash. Okay. So once we have connected to our vSphere client, which is over this one, vcss018.power.local. Okay. Then we can get the OS customization. Cannot log in into incorrect username. Okay, administrator it should be. Okay, we are connected now. Then we got the OS customization. I think value cannot be found for the mandatory parameter. Okay, so parameter we have to define here. Set OS customization NIC mapping. Okay, which mapping we have to do. or for which VM list. Okay, so that this file you have to give. Okay, so now this you can set the OS mapping as we have by the private unique IP address. Okay, which we have discussed in the XML file. And in the same way, the specific clone parameter which we have defined here, that also be called here. Okay, and in the same way, firewall rule we will be assigned. That would be a temporary part for which we can set the VM list in this way by using for loop. And in that way, we can create a VMs for this deploy.a CSV file. From this file, we have defined our VMs list for the ESXi server. So this is the code for our issues when we face on our VMware side, when we don't have to on a two networks we are doing an isolated network we have to create, and we are facing issues while stating the IP address. So this would be the code when we assign it to the particular IP address. Okay. So they have convert that they are getting an error because the specified method is not supported. Okay. So with regard to that, also we can check the PowerCLI reference, like what the network parameter is, if they are getting the VM in that proper VLAN ID, means DHCP ID is getting the IP address or not. Okay. So in this way, we have found that how we can create VMs using two networks. Thank you.